I walked into that glass conference room nervous, but ready, telling myself this was the day everything might finally turn around. Then she turned around. The woman I'd stopped to help on Route 9, the one I thought I'd missed everything for, stood there in a tailored charcoal suit. Not a stranger at all. Victoria Harper, CEO of a company I was interviewing for. My stomach dropped through the floor. 2 hours earlier, I'd been someone else entirely. The alarm clock screamed at 6:15 on a Monday morning, and I slapped it silent before the noise could wake Lily. Our mobile home had walls thin as paper, every sound carrying from one cramped room to the next. September rain hammered the aluminum roof like 1,000 tiny fists, and somewhere in the darkness, a leak plinked into the coffee can I'd wedged under the kitchen sink 3 months back. The whole place smelled faintly of motor oil, and the lavender air freshener Lily insisted made it feel more like home. I sat up on the pull-out couch that served as my bed, my back protesting the bar that dug into my spine every night. 38 years old, and I woke up feeling 60, the kind of tired that sleep never quite fixed. Emily's photograph watched me from the shelf above the television, her smile frozen in that moment, 2 weeks before the diagnosis, before cancer became the word that defined our lives, before I became a single father who didn't know what the hell he was doing half the time. I rubbed my face and reached for the stack of papers on the milk crate that functioned as my nightstand. Bills, always bills. The medical debt from Emily's treatments sat there like a monument to everything I couldn't fix. $4,200 still outstanding, the hospital sending increasingly stern letters about payment plans and final notices. Behind that, the electric bill 2 months overdue. The water company had already sent a disconnect warning. Lily's school permission slip for the Science Museum trip peeked out from under the stack. $15. Might as well have been $1,500 the way my bank account looked. But today might change everything. I'd been chasing the Harper industrial job for 8 months, ever since Frank Murphy mentioned they were finally hiring again after a long freeze. Senior technician position, $48,000 a year with benefits. Real health insurance, not the catastrophic only plan that covered nothing until you'd already lost everything. A salary that might let me sleep without doing math in my head about which bill to pay and which to let slide another month. 8 months of silence after I submitted my application. Then last week, out of nowhere, the call. Interview scheduled for 8:30 this morning. 16 September, a date I'd been repeating to myself like a prayer. I moved quietly through the morning routine, showering in the cramped bathroom, where the shower head sprayed in 3 different directions and the water took 5 minutes to run warm. The mirror was cracked down the middle from the previous tenant, splitting my reflection into 2 slightly misaligned versions of myself. I stared at the guy looking back, stubble going gray at the temples, lines around the eyes that hadn't been there when Emily was alive, a face that had seen better days but was still fighting. The thrift store suit hung on the back of the bathroom door, the one I'd bought for Emily's funeral and worn exactly twice since. Navy blue, a little loose in the shoulders, a small stain near the hem that I'd scrubbed as clean as I could manage. The tie was frayed at the tip where it had caught in a car door, but I folded it so the damaged part wouldn't show. I dressed slowly, carefully, like putting on armor for battle. When I emerged, Lily was already awake in her tiny bedroom, the door cracked open. I could see her through the gap, sitting cross-legged on her twin bed with a library book about rocket science spread across her lap. 9 years old, and she read like a college student, devouring everything she could get her hands on about how things worked, why things moved, what made the world tick. She looked up as I approached, and I saw Emily in her face. Same green eyes, same stubborn set to her jaw. She'd already made coffee in the ancient Mr. Coffee machine, the pot half full and still dripping. The machine was older than she was, a wedding present from Emily's mother that had somehow outlived both of them. I found my voice somewhere past the lump in my throat. "You didn't have to do that, sweetheart." Lily shrugged, dog-earing her page and setting the book aside. "You're nervous. Coffee helps." Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. She'd gotten good at reading my moods, at sensing the weight I tried not to let show. Kids who lose their mothers young learn to watch their fathers carefully, I discovered. They become students of your silences. We sat at the kitchen table together, the formica surface worn smooth in spots from decades of other families' meals. I poured coffee into my chipped Plainfield High mug while Lily worked her way through a bowl of store-brand cornflakes. Her hand reached across the table and touched mine. Small fingers, nails bitten short. You worried. I considered lying painting on the confident father face. But Lily and I didn't do that anymore. Hadn't since the night Emily died, and I'd had to explain to a 7-year-old that mommy wasn't coming home from the hospital. A little. This is a big opportunity. Lily tilted her head, studying me with those two knowing eyes. Mom used to say you were the best person she knew. They'll see that. My throat went tight. Your mom had a generous view of me. Mom was right about most things. Lily's voice carried absolute certainty, the kind only children possess. You're going to do great, Dad. I gripped her hand, drawing strength from her faith, even as part of me wondered what I'd done to deserve it. You know all this, everything I'm doing, it's for you, so you can have a better life than I did, better than we have now. Lily squeezed back. I know, Dad, I know. The moment stretched between us, father and daughter, in a falling down mobile home with rain leaking through the roof and bills we couldn't pay holding on to each other and the hope that things might get better. Then I glanced at the microwave clock and reality snapped back into focus. 7:40. If I left now, I'd have exactly enough time to make the 30-minute drive to Harper Industrial's headquarters in Indianapolis and arrive with 5 minutes to spare. Construction on I-70 had been backing up traffic for weeks. I kissed the top of Lily's head, grabbed my keys, and stepped out into the downpour. The Ford F-150 sat in its usual spot at the edge of the gravel lot, a 2003 model with rust eating the wheel wells and a temperamental starter that required 3 tries on cold mornings. The truck had been my father's before he died, one of the few things he'd left me besides his old toolbox and a lifetime of advice about fixing things and helping people. The engine coughed to life on the second attempt, settling into its familiar, rattling idle. I pulled out of Shady Acres Mobile Home Park, past the crooked sign in the manager's office, with its flickering neon onto the county road that would take me to the highway. Rain streaked the windshield faster than my dying wipers could clear it. The passenger side wiper had given up entirely weeks ago, leaving a permanent blind spot I'd learned to navigate around. The radio crackled to life mid-sentence, some morning DJ talking about Harper Industrial. Family-owned manufacturers celebrating 50 years in business, though the company has faced significant challenges since the death of founder Robert Harper 10 months ago. Harper's daughter, Victoria, 33, had assumed the CEO position amid questions about her experience and ability to fill her father's shoes. Sources inside the company report tensions between the new CEO and longtime executives over the company's direction. I turned it off. Didn't need the distraction. All I needed to know was that they were hiring, that I had a shot, that this interview represented the closest thing to a lifeline I'd seen in 2 years. The highway opened up before me, gray and wet, other vehicles throwing up spray that made visibility even worse. I settled into the middle lane, watching the mile markers tick by, doing mental calculations. Arrive at 8:25. 5 minutes to park and get inside. Find the right office check-in with reception. 8:30 on the dot. It would work. It had to work. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Text from Frank Murphy. Good luck today, Marcus. You got this. Proud of you, son. Frank had given me my first real job at his garage when I was 17, taught me everything about engines and hydraulics and the satisfying logic of mechanical systems. He'd been at Emily's funeral, had slipped me $500 in an envelope afterward, without a word, knowing I needed it but too proud to ask. When I told him about the Harper interview, he'd loaned me the tie I was wearing and offered to cover my shift so I wouldn't lose pay. I typed back one-handed. Thanks, Frank. Means a lot. 8:05, according to the dashboard clock. 25 minutes to go. The rain intensified, drumming harder, and I leaned forward to peer through the windshield. That's when I saw her. The Mercedes SUV sat at an angle on the shoulder of Route 9 hazard lights, blinking weakly in the downpour. A figure stood beside it, drenched and struggling with something near the front wheel. As I got closer, details resolved. A woman, maybe 30, wearing jeans and a Columbia jacket dark with water. Her hair hung in wet ropes around her face. She'd gotten the jack under the front end, but the spare tire leaned uselessly against the bumper, and even from 50 yards away I could see her hands were shaking. My foot moved toward the brake without conscious thought. Then my brain caught up, and I looked at the clock again. 8:06. If I stopped, I'd be late, no question about it. Changing a tire in this rain would take at least 20 minutes, probably longer if she'd never done it before. Add another 10 to get back up to speed, fight through traffic. I'd roll into Harper Industrial at 9, or later the interview slot long gone to someone who'd shown up on time. 8 months of waiting, one shot. The difference between keeping the lights on and sitting in the dark. My father's voice rose up from memory, clear as if he were sitting in the passenger seat. We'd been driving this same stretch of highway when I was 12, had passed a stranded motorist, and I'd asked why we were stopping when we had somewhere to be. Son, you help folks when they need it. Doesn't matter who they are or what it costs you. That's what separates us from animals. We got the capacity to choose kindness even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. The woman looked up as I passed, her face a mask of desperation and fear. Our eyes met for half a second through the rain and spray. I was going to be late. I was going to lose the interview. I was going to disappoint Lily and Frank and myself and everyone who'd ever believed I might amount to something more than a struggling mechanic living in a mobile home with medical debt he'd never pay off. I pulled onto the shoulder 30 feet ahead of the Mercedes and killed the engine. For a moment, I just sat there, hands on the wheel, watching the rain hammer down and feeling something that might have been regret or might have been relief. Then I grabbed my father's old toolbox from behind the seat, the one with Thomas Reed carved into the lid, and stepped out into the storm. Water soaked through my suit in seconds. The jacket went heavy on my shoulders, pants clinging to my legs, dress shoes flooding. $200 worth of thrift store professional appearance ruined before I'd taken 10 steps. The woman turned as I approached, her face transforming from defeat to desperate hope. I raised my voice over the rain. "Car trouble?" She nodded, water streaming down her face, and I noticed her hands were smeared with grease nails, broken from trying to wrench the lug nuts loose. The tire blew. I called roadside assistance, but they said 2 hours minimum in this weather. I tried to change it myself, but I can't. Her voice broke slightly, embarrassment and frustration mixing. I set the toolbox down and crouched beside the ruined tire. The sidewall had split completely, probably hit something sharp or just gave out from age and wear. The rim sat directly on the pavement. "I can help. Name's Marcus." She hesitated for just a beat, and I caught something in her expression I couldn't quite read. Fear, uncertainty. But then it passed and she managed a weak smile. "Vicky, I'm Vicky." I nodded and went to work. The lug nuts had been tightened by some gorilla with an impact wrench, each one requiring my full weight on the tire iron to break loose. Rain ran into my eyes and down my collar. My hands slipped on wet metal. The professional suit I'd so carefully prepared became a sodden, ruined mud, splashing up from the gravel shoulder to stain the pants. While I worked, Vicky hovered nearby, watching with an intensity that felt like more than simple gratitude. "Why did you stop?" The question came quiet, almost lost in the downpour. "Most people just drive past." I grunted, wrestling with a particularly stubborn lug nut. The iron slipped, and I barked my knuckles against the rim, drawing blood. "My father taught me that a man's character isn't measured by the money he makes. It's measured by the times he helps people when nobody's watching." Silence from above me. When I glanced up, Vicky was staring with an expression I couldn't decipher. Something intense and searching, like she was trying to see through to my bones. I returned to the tire. Besides, someone needed help. That's reason enough. Even when it costs you something. The question landed heavier than she probably intended. I thought about the interview, about the minutes ticking away, about everything I was sacrificing in this moment for a stranger I'd never see again. Especially then. We worked in silence after that, me doing the actual labor, while Vicky handed me tools and held the spare steady while I lined up the bolts. My fingers went numb in the cold rain. Water pooled in my shoes. The back of my neck ached from bending over in an awkward position. But there was something clean about it too. Simple. A problem with a solution, a person who needed help, and someone who could provide it. No complexity, no weighing costs and benefits. Just a tire that needed changing, and hands that knew how to change it. 20 minutes later, I tightened the final lug nut and stood wiping rain from my face with equally wet hands. The Mercedes sat on its spare, the destroyed tire lying in a puddle near the tree line. Vicky pulled out her wallet, rain-spotted leather, with what looked like several $100s visible inside. She peeled off 5 20s and held them out. I shook my head, not touching the money. "Can't take that. Please. You've helped so much. Doing the right thing isn't something you charge for." I picked up my father's toolbox, feeling the familiar weight of it, the solidity of good tools maintained over decades. If you want to pay me back, pass it forward. Help the next person who needs it. Vicky lowered the money, slowly studying me with that same intense gaze. Rain ran down both our faces, the highway traffic hissing past, and for a moment we just stood there in the storm looking at each other. She broke the silence first, her voice carrying an odd note of urgency. "The interview you mentioned. Which company?" I blinked, surprised she'd remembered my offhand comment about being on my way somewhere. Had I mentioned an interview I must have while we were working? Harper Industrial, senior technician position. Had an appointment at 8:30. I glanced at my watch, the crystal fogged with condensation. 8:27. Well, had being the operative word. Something flickered across Vicky's face. Shock, recognition. It vanished too quickly to identify. "I know that company." The words came carefully measured, like she was weighing each one. "What's your full name?" "Marcus Reed." I shifted the toolbox to my other hand, suddenly uncomfortable with the scrutiny. "But it doesn't matter now. Interview's gone. They don't give second chance to people who show up late." Vicky's jaw tightened. When she spoke again, her voice carried absolute certainty. "Maybe they should." Before I could respond, she climbed into the Mercedes and started the engine. The window hummed down and she leaned toward me, rain immediately speckling the leather interior. "Marcus Reed. I won't forget." Then she pulled away, tires kicking up spray, leaving me standing on the shoulder of Route 9 in a ruined suit with my father's toolbox and the growing certainty that I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. I drove the rest of the way to Harper Industrial anyway, some stubborn part of me refusing to accept defeat without at least trying. The headquarters rose up from the Indianapolis commercial district like a monument to everything I wasn't, 8 stories of glass and steel reflecting the storm clouds overhead. The parking lot held rows of nice cars, Audis and BMWs and Tesla's, vehicles worth more than I'd earned in the last 5 years combined. I parked my beat-up truck in the back row next to the dumpsters where it wouldn't offend anyone's sensibilities. The lobby hit me like a wall of money and power, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, a reception desk carved from some dark wood that probably cost more than my mobile home. The Harper Industrial logo rendered in brushed steel 10 feet tall, hanging behind the receptionist like a corporate coat of arms. I approached the desk, trailing water, my shoes squelching with each step, leaving dark footprints on the expensive marble. The receptionist looked up from her computer screen, her professional smile faltering, when she took in my appearance. Mud-stained pants, soaked jacket, blood on my knuckles from where I'd scraped them on the tire rim. "Can I help you?" I tried for confidence and landed somewhere near desperate. "Marcus Reed. I had an 8:30 interview with Mr. Reed." She cut me off with the efficient brutality of someone who dealt with failures daily. "Your appointment was 30 minutes ago. It's now 8:52. "I understand, but I had an emergency. If I could just explain to whoever." "Mr. Chambers doesn't interview candidates who arrive late. It's company policy." Her tone made it clear this conversation was over. "You're welcome to reapply in 6 months. 6 months. 6 months of the lights getting shut off, and the water company disconnecting service, and medical debt collectors calling at dinner time. 6 months of watching Lily pretend she didn't notice we were barely hanging on. Please, the word came out rougher than I intended. 5 minutes, I can explain. I'm sorry, have a good day." The dismissal was absolute. I stood there for another few seconds, dripping on her perfect marble, feeling the weight of every bad decision I'd ever made pressing down on my shoulders. Then I turned and walked out past the logo and the leather furniture and the potted plants that probably cost more to maintain than I spent on groceries in a month. Back in the truck, I sat with my hands on the wheel and let myself feel it. The crushing disappointment, the rage at my own stupidity. What kind of idiot throws away his future for a stranger on the highway? My father's kind, apparently. The kind who dies at 58 with nothing to show for a lifetime of kindness except a beat-up toolbox and a son who inherited his talent for making noble gestures that didn't pay the bills. I started the engine and pointed the truck toward Murphy's Auto Repair, toward the life I'd tried and failed to escape. Frank was under a Honda Civic when I pulled into the garage bay, his legs sticking out from beneath the frame. He rolled out on the creeper when he heard my footsteps, took one look at my mud-stained suit, and knew. "Oh, son, I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Frank stood and gripped my shoulder with his oil-stained hand, the gesture worth more than any words. What happened? So I told him. The woman on the highway, the choice, the tire, the receptionist, efficient rejection. Frank listened without interrupting, his weathered face giving nothing away. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, just standing there in the familiar smell of motor oil and brake fluid and old coffee. You did right, Marcus. I laughed, bitter and sharp. Did I? Because from where I'm standing, I just threw away 8 months of waiting for 20 minutes of getting wet. Frank's grip on my shoulder tightened. Your daddy would have done the exact thing he'd be proud to done. My dad died broke, Frank. Is that what you want from me, to be so busy being good that I can't take care of my own daughter? Your daddy died respected, loved. That's worth more than you think. Frank's voice carried the weight of 65 years of living. Doing right doesn't always bring immediate rewards, son. Sometimes it takes years to see the payoff, but it shapes who you are, and that matters more than any job. I wanted to believe him, wanted to think that character and kindness in helping strangers would somehow translate into Lily's college fund and paid medical bills. But standing there in my ruined interview suit, I couldn't quite make the math work. I changed into my work coveralls and spent the rest of the day the elbow deep in engine blocks, losing myself in the honest simplicity of broken things that could be fixed. Oil changes and brake jobs in a transmission rebuild on a 2015 Chevy that fought me every step of the way. Physical work that left no room for thinking about missed opportunities. By the time I picked up Lily from school, I'd almost convinced myself I was okay. She climbed into the truck with her backpack and her library books, buckled her seatbelt, and turned those two perceptive eyes on me. Didn't go well. No point in lying. I didn't make it to the interview. Had to stop and help someone on the way. Lily processed this for a few seconds, her face serious. Did you help them? Yeah, sweetheart. Changed her tire in the rain. Then it's okay. She said it with such certainty, such absolute faith. Mom always said you had a special gift. You make people believe good things still exist. My throat closed up. I reached over and squeezed her hand, this 9-year-old girl who'd lost her mother and gained a father who couldn't quite keep the world from falling apart, but kept trying anyway. We drove home in comfortable silence, country roads giving way to the mobile home park's gravel lot. Inside our cramped quarters, Lily settled at the kitchen table to do homework, while I tried to figure out what we could make for dinner from a pantry growing increasingly bare. Then my phone buzzed, email notification. I almost ignored it, assumed it was another bill collector or spam, but something made me look. From Janet Morrison, HR Director, Harper Industrial, subject interview. Reschedule, Marcus Reed. My heart stopped. I read it twice, 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. Dear Mr. Reed, due to unforeseen circumstances, we would like to reschedule your interview to Thursday, September 19th at 2 p.m. We apologize for any inconvenience. Please confirm your attendance at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Janet Morrison, HR Director, Harper Industrial Solutions. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Companies didn't do this. Harper Industrial especially didn't do this. The receptionist had been crystal clear about their policy on late arrivals. Unless Vicky had done something, said something, but she was just a stranded motorist, wasn't she? Lily looked up from her math homework. What's wrong, Dad? Nothing's wrong. I showed her the email. They want to reschedule, Thursday afternoon. Her face split into a grin that made her look 6 instead of 9. See, I told you it would work out, but doubt gnawed at me. Why would they reschedule? What had changed? And more importantly, was this legitimate or some kind of pity move that would end the same way when I actually showed up? I lay awake that night on the pull-out couch, listening to rain still pattering against the roof and the leak still dripping into its coffee can. My phone glowed in the darkness as I researched Harper Industrial, trying to understand what had happened. The company had been founded by Robert Harper 50 years ago, built from a 2-bay garage into one of the Midwest's largest automotive parts manufacturers. 3 plants, 600 employees, contracts with major automakers. Robert Harper had died 10 months earlier, and his daughter Victoria had taken over as CEO despite having no prior executive experience. I clicked through news articles about the transition. Most were skeptical. Harper's daughter faces uphill battle, read one headline. Board questions, Victoria Harper's qualifications, read another. The stock price had dropped 15% in her first 6 months. Rumors swirled about internal power struggles, longtime executives pushing back against her leadership. Then I found photos of Victoria Harper. My finger froze over the screen. It was her, Vicky, the woman on Route 9 with the flat tire and the desperate expression and the strange intensity when I talked about character. Victoria Harper, CEO, the person who would ultimately decide whether I got hired. And I'd met her on the side of the highway, helped her turn down her money, had no idea who she was. She'd lied about her name, or at least omitted the truth. Why the questions spiraled through my mind, chasing sleep away. Was the rescheduled interview real? Had she set this up as some kind of test? Or was it genuine gratitude that would evaporate the moment I walked through those doors again? I picked up my phone 3 times to call the HR number and confirm, then put it down each time. What would I even say? Is this interview actually legitimate? Or are you just feeling sorry for the wet mechanic? Finally, around 3 in the morning, I sent a simple confirmation email. Accepted the Thursday slot, committed to showing up. Then I spent Tuesday and Wednesday second-guessing everything. Frank tried to talk me through it over lunch on Wednesday burgers from the diner across the street that neither of us could really afford. So she's the CEO and she didn't tell you. Frank chewed thoughtfully. Question is why. That's what keeps me up at night. I pushed fries around my plate. Maybe she wanted to see who I really was when I didn't know she mattered. Or maybe she just forgot to mention it. Hell, maybe she gives out fake names to everyone. Or maybe, Frank said carefully, she was having a bad day and needed help and didn't want to be CEO Victoria Harper for 20 minutes. Wanted to just be a person. I hadn't considered that. The idea that someone with power and money might want to escape it even briefly. Either way, Frank continued, you helped someone who needed it. That's good regardless of who they turn out to be. The interview's legitimate or it's not. You show up, do your best, see what happens. Easy advice. Harder to follow when your daughter's future depended on the outcome. Thursday morning arrived too fast and too slow. I borrowed another suit from Frank, this one actually tailored and in good condition. Practiced my answers to common interview questions while Lily quizzed me over breakfast. Tried not to throw up from nerves. At 1:30, I climbed into the truck and started the drive to Indianapolis, allowing extra time in case of traffic or acts of God or any other disasters that might derail this second chance. The Harper Industrial Building looked exactly the same as it had Monday, imposing and expensive and completely out of my league. But this time I had an appointment. This time I was expected. I parked in the same back row next to the same dumpsters and walked across the lot with my heart hammering against my ribs. The receptionist was different today, a younger woman who smiled when I gave my name and directed me to the elevator bank without any mention of lateness or policy violations. Third floor, conference room C. The elevator rose smoothly silent except for the quiet hum of expensive machinery. I caught my reflection in the polished doors. The borrowed suit fit better than my own had. I'd shaved carefully, trimmed my graying hair, looked as professional as a mechanic could manage. But underneath, I was still the same guy. Still broke, still desperate, still in over my head. The doors opened onto a hallway lined with conference rooms, their glass walls offering views of the corporate world I'd never inhabited. Men and women in suits moved purposefully between meetings. Phones rang, printers hummed. Everything was clean and organized, and nothing like the chaos of Frank's garage. Conference room C sat at the end of the hall, its glass walls frosted for privacy. Through the translucent panels, I could see shapes moving inside, multiple people. I took a breath, straightened my tie, and knocked. A woman in her 50s opened the door, extending her hand with professional warmth. Mr. Reed, I'm Janet Morrison, HR Director. Please come in. The conference room was exactly what I'd expected. Long table, expensive chairs, windows, overlooking the Indianapolis skyline. 3 people waited inside. A man in his 40s with graying temples and a severe expression introduced as Derek Chambers, plant manager. Another man older with kind eyes introduced as Tom Stevens, chief engineer. And at the far end of the table, standing with her back to the room, looking out the window at the city below, a woman in a charcoal suit with her hair pulled back in a professional knot. She turned around as Janet closed the door. Victoria Harper, Vicky from Route 9, the CEO. Our eyes met and the world tilted sideways. Recognition flared in her gaze, quickly masked by professional composure, but I'd seen it. She knew exactly who I was, had known since the moment I'd submitted my confirmation email. She'd set this up, rescheduled the interview, brought me here. But why? The silence stretched for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Derek Chambers glanced between us, his expression shifting to curiosity. Do you two know each other? Victoria's voice came out smooth and controlled, giving nothing away. Mr. Reed helped me with car trouble earlier this week. I didn't get a chance to properly thank him. Derek's eyebrow rose slightly, but he said nothing. Tom Stevens nodded politely. Janet gestured for me to take a seat. I sat, my mind racing, trying to process the implications. She hadn't revealed my identity. Hadn't mentioned I'd missed the first interview because I'd stopped to help her. Played it as coincidence, as if running into each other again was perfectly normal. Playing it straight. Or playing some game I didn't understand yet. Victoria took the seat at the head of the table, her posture perfect, every inch the CEO, despite being younger than half the executives I'd glimpsed in the hallway. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority completely absent from Vicky on the roadside. Shall we begin? Derek led the questioning, pulling out my resume and frowning at it like it had personally offended him. 15 years at Murphy's Auto Repair. Before that, various mechanic positions. No formal education beyond high school. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. That's correct. And you think that qualifies you for a senior technical position at a major manufacturer? His tone made it clear what he thought of my chances. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. I think 15 years of hands-on experience with every kind of mechanical and hydraulic system qualifies me to understand how things actually work, not just how textbooks say they should work. Your engineers learn theory. I learn practice. There's value in both. Derek's frown deepened, but Tom Stevens nodded slightly, a hint of approval in his expression. The questions came faster after that. Technical details about hydraulic pressures and pneumatic systems and production line maintenance. I answered each one, drawing on years of real-world problem solving, translating garage floor experience into corporate terminology. Derek challenged every answer, probing for gaps in my knowledge, looking for the hole that would justify rejecting me. Tom asked follow-up questions that suggested genuine interest rather than skepticism. Janet took notes, and Victoria watched, said nothing, just observed with those intense eyes, the same expression she'd worn on Route 9 when I'd explained why I'd stopped to help. Finally, Derek leaned back in his chair and asked the question I'd been dreading. Why did you miss your original interview Monday? The room went still. Janet's pen stopped mid-word. Tom looked up from the resume he'd been studying. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. A test, maybe, or genuine curiosity about what I'd say. I could lie, could make up a story about car trouble or a family emergency or any of a dozen plausible excuses that wouldn't make me look like an idiot who threw away opportunities. But I'd built a life on telling the truth even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. I stopped to help someone stranded on the highway, change their tire in the rain. By the time I finished, I knew I'd be late, but I couldn't just drive past someone who needed help. Derek's expression hardened. So you prioritized a stranger over a professional obligation. I prioritized doing the right thing. Yes, even though it cost you the interview. Even though. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Derek and Janet exchanged glances. Tom studied me with new interest. Victoria spoke for the first time since the interview began, her voice cutting through the tension. Mr. Reed, do you regret that choice? I turned to face her, this woman who'd lied about her name and tested me without my knowledge, and now sat in judgment of the very decision she'd precipitated. No, ma'am, I don't regret helping someone who needed it. I paused, then added with deliberate weight, but I do have questions about why that someone felt the need to conceal who she was. The challenge hung in the air between us. Derek's eyes widened slightly. Janet's pen dropped to the table. Tom made a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Victoria held my gaze, something like respect flickering across her features. When she spoke, her voice carried steel beneath the polish. This interview is clearly going to require a longer conversation than we'd anticipated. Derek, Tom, Janet, if you'll excuse us for a moment. It wasn't a request. Derek looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Victoria's expression stopped him. The three of them filed out, leaving me alone with the CEO in the glass-walled room where anyone passing in the hall could see us, but not hear the conversation about to happen. Victoria stood and moved to the window, her back to me, and for a moment she was just Vicky again. Uncertain, human. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its executive armor. You have every right to be angry. I stood too, unable to sit still. I'm not angry, I'm confused. You lied about your name, manipulated me into this interview, and I still don't know when. She turned and the vulnerability in her expression caught me off guard. I didn't manipulate you. The flat tire was real. My distress was real, and when you stopped, she trailed off, searching for words. Do you have any idea how many people drove past me that morning? That's not an answer, Bob. No, it's not. Victoria crossed her arms, defensive but honest. I spend every day surrounded by people who want something from me. Board members who question my decisions. Executives who undermine my authority. Employees who fear me. Everyone sees the CEO, the Harper, name the money. Nobody sees me. So you decided to test whether I'd help you when I didn't know you mattered. I didn't know you were interviewing here. The words came out sharp, almost anguished. I was driving to an unannounced site inspection, trying to see the company the way my father used to, without everyone putting on performances, because the CEO was watching. The tire blew. You stopped. And for 20 minutes, I was just a person who needed help, and you were just someone kind enough to give it. No calculations, no agendas, just human decency. She moved closer, her eyes searching mine. Then you mentioned Harper Industrial, and I realized the man who'd sacrificed his future to help a stranger was the same person we were supposed to interview that morning. The same person Derek had already decided to reject for being late. So you overruled him. I gave you a second chance, yes, because what I saw on Route 9 told me more about your character than any interview ever could. I wanted to believe her, wanted to think this was about character and second chances, and not just some CEO playing games with people's lives. But trust didn't come easy anymore, not after watching Emily die, and burying her with money I didn't have, and raising a daughter alone in a mobile home while the world kept demanding more than I could give. This job, I said carefully, is it real? Or am I some PR stunt to show the board you care about hiring good people? Hurt flashed across Victoria's face, quickly masked. I don't build my company on PR stunts, Mr. Reed. 600 people depend on me making good decisions. Every hire, every policy, every choice affects real families. I won't risk that for optics. Then what do you want from me? I want you to take the job. The words came fierce, almost desperate. I want someone working here who makes decisions based on what's right instead of what's profitable. Someone who sees a problem and fixes it instead of forming a committee to study it. Someone who, she stopped herself, regaining control. Someone I can trust. The admission hung between us, raw and honest. And in that moment, I saw past the CEO to the woman underneath. Alone, under siege, trying to honor her father's legacy while everyone waited for her to fail. Maybe we had more in common than I'd thought. Before I could respond, Janet's voice came through the intercom, urgent and stressed. Ms. Harper, we have an emergency at Plant 2. Line 3 is shut down completely. Production is stopped. Victoria's transformation was instant, the vulnerable woman vanishing behind executive armor. She moved to the intercom. How long has it been down? 90 minutes. Engineering can't identify the problem. Derek's voice cut in. I'm heading there now. Victoria made a split-second decision, the kind that probably defined her every day. I'm coming with you. Then she turned to me, and something in her expression shifted. A gamble, maybe, or a test I hadn't seen coming. Mr. Reed, what kind of line are we talking about? I blinked, surprised she was asking. Ma'am, Plant 2, Line 3. Do you know what type of assembly system it is? Automated assembly, probably hydraulic and pneumatic integration for component placement. I'd studied Harper Industrial's operations when I'd first applied, memorized their processes. Victoria's eyes locked onto mine with laser focus. Could you diagnose a failure on that system? Derek's voice came through the intercom, skeptical. With respect, Victoria, this is a $2 million automated line, not a car engine. But Victoria kept her gaze on me, waiting for my answer. I thought about the job I just interviewed for, the opportunity hanging in the balance, the easy answer that would keep me safely in my lane as a technician who fixed what he was told to fix. Then I thought about Lily and the bills and the chance to prove I was worth more than my lack of degrees suggested. I can try. Victoria smiled, fierce and approving. Then let's go. The Mercedes swallowed highway miles with a smoothness my truck had never known, Victoria's hands steady on the wheel while Derek occupied the back seat, making increasingly tense phone calls. I sat passenger side, watching Indianapolis suburbs blur past my borrowed suit, still damp in places from Monday's rain, wondering what exactly I just agreed to. Plant 2 rose from the industrial district like a steel cathedral, 30,000 square feet of corrugated metal and concrete, surrounded by employee parking lots, half empty at this afternoon hour. Victoria pulled into a reserved spot near the main entrance, killed the engine and was out before I'd finished unbuckling. Inside, the facility hummed with the particular tension of forced idleness. Workers clustered in small groups, voices low watching as we passed. The production floor stretched ahead, massive and loud, except for one conspicuous section where Line 3 sat silent and dark, a 200-foot mechanical corpse surrounded by engineers with tablets and furrowed brows. Tom Stevens stood at the center of the chaos, his kind face from the conference room replaced by frustration verging on desperation. He looked up as Victoria approached, relief and embarrassment mixing in his expression. "We've checked everything. Hydraulic pressure, pneumatic feeds, all sensors, the entire PLC system. Nothing's out of spec, but the line won't engage." Derek moved past me to examine a tablet one of the engineers held. "How much is this costing us?" Tom didn't need to check numbers. $50,000 for every hour we're down. We're at hour 2. Victoria's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. "Show me what you've tried." While Tom walked her through their diagnostic process, I moved closer to the line itself, tuning out the corporate conversation to focus on the machine. The assembly system was beautiful in its complexity, a marriage of hydraulic power and pneumatic precision, designed to place automotive components with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Robotic arms frozen mid-reach, conveyor belts still, the whole thing waiting for a signal that wouldn't come. I crouched beside the main hydraulic manifold, running my hand along the lines, feeling for temperature differentials or vibration signatures that might indicate restriction. The metal was cool, evenly distributed, nothing obvious. Derek's voice cut through my concentration, sharp with skepticism. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I glanced up to find him looming over me, arms crossed. Behind him, Victoria and Tom had stopped their conversation to watch, looking for what they might have missed. "This is a $2 million automated system, not a Chevy with a bad alternator." I stood facing him directly. "Principles are the same. Pressure goes in, work comes out. When work stops, something's restricting flow or blocking signal. Just a matter of finding where. We have degreed engineers who've been searching for 90 minutes. And they found nothing out of spec, which means they're looking at the wrong specs." I turned to Tom, whose expression had shifted from frustration to cautious interest. "When was the last maintenance cycle?" He pulled up records on his tablet, scrolling through entries. "Full service 30 days ago. Filters, changed fluids, topped all standard protocols." "Primary filters?" "Of course, primary filters. What else is there?" That's when I saw it. Not what was wrong, but what they'd forgotten existed. "You have the hydraulic system schematic." Tom handed over his tablet, and I pulled up the technical drawings, zooming past the main manifold to the secondary routing buried behind the primary panel. There, a small notation most people would skip right over. "Secondary filter housing legacy component from an older system version left in place during upgrades, because removing it would require tearing down half the line. Engineers maintaining the system followed the current manual, which didn't mention components that weren't supposed to matter anymore. But under sustained high production, that forgotten filter housing would accumulate microscopic metal particles, pressure differentials building until flow restriction triggered safety shutoffs. The diagnostic systems couldn't trace back to a part that officially didn't exist. You need a 3/8 wrench and a flashlight. Tom's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Why the secondary filter housing behind the main panel? It's not in your current maintenance schedule because it was phased out 3 system versions ago, but it's still there, still in the hydraulic path, and under your production volume, it's probably clogged solid. The engineers exchanged glances. Derek's skepticism remained etched in stone, but Victoria stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. You're certain? No, but I'm right. A smile ghosted across her lips, there and gone. Tom, get him what he needs. 5 minutes later, I was on my back beneath the line with a flashlight between my teeth and Tom's toolbox beside me. The secondary housing sat exactly where the schematic indicated, covered in 3 system generations worth of dust and grime. I worked the access panel bolts loose one at a time, feeling vibrations through my spine as other lines continued their work nearby. Behind me, Derek muttered something to Victoria about liability and qualified technicians. She shut him down with 2 words I couldn't quite catch. The access panel came free, and I reached into the cavity fingers, finding the filter housing by feel more than sight. The retaining ring turned with difficulty, metal grinding against metal. When the housing finally pulled free, I held it up to the light. Black. Completely saturated with microscopic metal particles, the filter element so clogged it might as well have been solid steel. I rolled out from under the line and held up the part like a trophy. Tom took it from my hands, examining the buildup with growing amazement. This would absolutely cause system shutdown. Pressure drop across this restriction would trigger every safety protocol we have. One of the younger engineers peered at the component. I've never seen that in any of our maintenance documentation. Because someone updated the manual 3 versions ago and never thought to mention legacy components that might still be installed. I stood brushing dust from Frank's borrowed suit. Replace the filter, you'll be running in 20 minutes. Tom barked orders and engineers scattered to locate replacement parts. Derek's expression had shifted from skepticism to something harder to read. Grudging respect, maybe. Or just recalculation of whatever assumptions he'd brought to the plant. Victoria approached while the team worked, stopping close enough that only I could hear her voice over the industrial noise. How did you know? Because I don't just look at what manuals tell me to look at, I look at what's actually there. The words came out rougher than intended, exhaustion and adrenaline mixing. Engineers solve problems by following procedures. Mechanics solve them by understanding why procedures fail. She studied me for a long moment, and I saw the decision forming before she spoke it. 30 minutes ago, you were interviewing for senior technician. That job's still available if you want it. But I have a different offer. Senior technical operations lead. You'd report to Derek, work across all 3 plants, identifying and solving problems, exactly like you just did here. $72,000 annual salary with full benefits. Start Monday. The number hit like a physical blow. $72,000, nearly double what I'd been hoping for with the technician position. More money than I'd made in any single year of my life. Why? The question came out hoarse. You've known me for 4 days. Watch me change 1 tire and find 1 filter. I've watched you make 2 decisions. Victoria's voice carried absolute conviction. Monday, you chose helping a stranger over your own future. Today, you risked looking foolish to solve a $100,000 problem. That tells me everything I need about how you think and what you value. I need time. The words felt like tearing something. And I need to talk to Frank Murphy. He gave me a job when nobody else would. I owe him proper notice. Respect flickered in Victoria's eyes. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to train my replacement. Then I'm yours. One more thing. She pulled a business card from her jacket pocket, writing on the back with a pen. This is my personal number. I want you to have dinner with me and your daughter tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. Your place. Every professional instinct screamed warning. CEOs didn't have dinner at employees' mobile homes. This crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed, mixing personal and professional in ways that could only end badly. But something in her expression stopped my reflexive refusal. Loneliness, the same kind I saw in my own mirror every morning. Why, Payo? Because if you're going to impact my company, I want to know the person behind the work. And because, she paused, vulnerability cracking through executive armor. Because I'd like to meet the daughter who taught you to value character over convenience. I pocketed the card. 6 o'clock. But fair warning, we don't have much. I don't need much, just honest. Behind us, the line groaned to life, hydraulic pressure building pneumatic systems, engaging the whole magnificent machine, remembering its purpose. Workers cheered. Tom pumped his fist. Even Derek managed something approaching a smile. Victoria extended her hand and I shook it, her grip firm and warm. Welcome to Harper Industrial Marcus. The drive back to Plainfield happened in a fog of disbelief. $72,000. Benefits. A real job with a real future. The kind of opportunity I'd stopped believing existed for people like me. Frank was closing up the garage when I arrived, sweeping the bay floor in the evening light. He took one look at my face and set the broom aside. Well, so I told him. The plant, the line, the filter, the offer. Frank listened without interrupting his weathered features, giving nothing away until I mentioned the salary. $72,000, Lord have mercy. I need 2 weeks to train someone. Won't leave you in the lurch. Frank waved that away like smoke. I've been planning to retire Marcus. This just moves up the timeline. You take that job. Take it and don't look back. Frank, your daddy would be proud of you, son. I'm proud of you. His voice went rough with emotion. You've earned this. Earned it by being the kind of man who stops for strangers and fixes what's broken without needing credit. Don't you dare feel guilty about succeeding. We stood there in the quiet garage surrounded by the tools and smells and familiar chaos of 15 years, and I felt something shift. Not an ending exactly, more like a door opening onto a future I'd stopped imagining was possible. That night, I made Lily's favorite dinner, spaghetti with meat sauce from a jar and garlic bread from the grocery store bakery. She sensed something different in my mood, kept shooting curious glances across our tiny kitchen table. Finally, I couldn't hold it anymore. How would you feel about moving out of here, getting a real house with your own room? Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. What happened? I explained about the job, keeping it simple, watching her process the information with that too adult expression she'd worn since Emily died. $72,000 a year. Plus benefits, real health insurance. Lily set down her fork carefully like it might break. We could pay the hospital. The question drove a spike through my chest. She'd been worrying about the medical debt. Of course she had, 9 years old and carrying her father's financial stress like it was her responsibility. We can pay the hospital, pay the bills, get you into that STEM program at school you wanted but said was too expensive. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, Emily's stubborn strength showing through. Mom would be happy. Yeah, sweetheart, she would be. We finished dinner in comfortable silence, both of us processing the magnitude of change heading our way. Afterward, while Lily tackled homework, I stood outside the mobile home, looking at the night sky and trying to believe this was real. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Thank you for today. You gave me hope that good people still exist. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, thank you for the second chance. Her reply came instantly. It's not charity. You earned it. Maybe. Or maybe I'd just gotten lucky helping the right person at the right time. Either way, I wasn't about to question it. Friday morning, I told Lily about Victoria coming for dinner. She went into planning mode, immediately making lists of what we needed to clean and what we should cook and whether our plates were nice enough for a CEO. And she's just a person, Lily. She eats food like everyone else. She's your boss, Dad. We can't serve her on paper plates. Fair point. We spent Friday afternoon cleaning the mobile home within an inch of its life, Lily attacking dust and clutter with manic energy, while I tried to make our cramped quarters look less desperate. New shower curtain from the dollar store, air freshener to cover the permanent motor oil smell. I even fixed the drip under the sink, something I'd been putting off for months. Saturday, I drove to the grocery store with money I didn't quite have and bought ingredients for a real meal. Nothing fancy, just meatloaf and mashed potatoes and green beans, but fresh instead of frozen. And a chocolate cake from the bakery because Lily insisted we needed dessert. At 5:30, I was pacing the kitchen, convinced this was a terrible idea. CEOs didn't eat dinner at mobile homes. This was going to be awkward at best, humiliating at worst. Victoria would walk in, see how we really lived, and realize she'd made a mistake offering me the job. At 5:57, headlights swept across our window. Lily straightened her shirt for the 10th time. I took a breath and opened the door. Victoria stood on our makeshift porch holding a store-bought chocolate cake and looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen her. She'd traded the CEO armor for jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down around her shoulders instead of pulled back in that professional knot, trying to be Vicky instead of Victoria Harper. I brought dessert, then realized you probably already had dessert planned, and now I feel like an idiot. The words tumbled out nervous and fast, completely unlike the composed executive from the plant. I took the cake smiling despite my own anxiety. We can never have too much chocolate. Come in. She stepped inside and I watched her take in our reality. The cramped living space, the furniture from thrift stores and yard sales, the leak-stained ceiling and the duct tape holding together one corner of the linoleum. Everything I tried to hide or fix or make presentable still adding up to poverty barely held at bay. But Victoria's expression didn't show pity or judgment, just quiet observation like she was cataloging details that mattered. Lily emerged from her bedroom shy in a way I rarely saw her. Victoria crouched down immediately, making herself smaller, less intimidating. You must be Lily. Your dad talks about you constantly. He does, Lily shot me a skeptical look. Told me you want to be an engineer. That's wonderful. We need more women in STEM fields. Did you study engineering? The question came cautious. Testing. Mechanical engineering at Purdue, then an MBA AI barely use. Victoria's smile held self-deprecation. But I learned the most from my father working on the factory floor. Theory's important, but watching how things actually work teaches you more than any classroom. Lily's posture relaxed slightly, someone who understood that hands-on learning mattered more than books alone. Dinner unfolded with surprising ease. Victoria praised the meatloaf like it was filet mignon, asked Lily about her favorite subjects and science fair ideas, treated our mobile home like it was perfectly normal for a CEO to be eating off mismatched plates in a space smaller than most people's living rooms. Lily, never one for subtle approaches, eventually dropped her fork and asked point blank, "Are you rich?" I nearly choked on my mashed potatoes. "Lily," Victoria laughed, genuine and unforced. "Yes, I have money, but you know what, I'd trade a lot of it for what you have here." Lily's forehead wrinkled in confusion. "What do we have?" "A real family. You and your dad love each other. This place is small, but it's full of warmth. My house is huge," and she trailed off, something raw showing through. "Empty. I eat alone every night. Come home to silence. Have everything money can buy, except people who care about me for who I am instead of what I represent." The confession hung in the air, honest and painful. Lily processed this with her characteristic seriousness. "You should eat with us more often then." Victoria's eyes glistened, but she blinked the moisture away. "I'd like that very much." After dinner, while Lily showed Victoria her collection of library books about rockets and robots, I cleared plates and wondered how this had become my life. 4 days ago, I'd been a broke mechanic with no prospects. Now I had a job that paid real money and a CEO sitting on my threadbare couch, genuinely interested in my 9-year-old's dreams. Later, after Lily went to bed, Victoria and I sat outside on the concrete step that served as our porch, watching moths circle the sodium light that illuminated the mobile home park. "Thank you for letting me come." Her voice was soft, the executive mask completely gone. "I know this was probably uncomfortable. You drove out here to eat meatloaf in a trailer park. I think you were the uncomfortable one." "No." She shook her head firmly. "This is the most comfortable I've felt in months. Nobody wanted anything from me." Lily asked real questions. "You served food you actually cooked instead of catered from some expensive restaurant. It was just human." I studied her profile in the dim light, this woman who had everything and nothing, wealth and loneliness wrapped up together. "Why did you really hire me?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment, choosing words carefully. "My father built Harper Industrial from a 2-bay garage, worked alongside his employees, knew every worker's name, their kids' names, what problems they were facing. As the company grew, he never lost that connection. Never forgot that a business is just people trying to make a living and do good work." She turned to face me directly. "When I took over the board, wanted me to cut costs, layoffs, benefit reductions, automation that would eliminate jobs, modernize and streamline," they said. But that's not what my father would have wanted. He built this company believing you could be profitable and humane at the same time. So I'm some symbol of that philosophy. No, the words came sharp. You're someone who proves it's possible. Derek and the other executives, they see workers as line items on spreadsheets. You see them as people doing jobs that matter. That perspective is exactly what I need if I'm going to honor my father's vision instead of betraying it. The weight of that expectation settled on my shoulders. She wasn't just hiring me to fix machines. She was hiring me to be proof that her way of running the company could work. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Then you fail. Victoria's voice held no judgment. But I don't think you will. You've spent 15 years solving problems everyone else said couldn't be fixed. That's the only qualification that matters. We sat in companionable silence, two lonely people who'd found unexpected connection in the most unlikely circumstances. Victoria broke the quiet first. There's something you should know. My uncle Daniel Harper is the COO. He owns 15% of the company and has allies on the board. He's been pushing for me to step down since my father died, arguing I'm too inexperienced and emotional to run a major manufacturer. Let me guess, he wants to be CEO. He wants to sell the company to a large corporation and cash out. 40 years of my father's work, 600 employees' livelihoods, all reduced to a transaction that makes a handful of shareholders rich and destroys everything my father built. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. How close is he to succeeding? The board split. 4 support me, 4 support him. The next quarterly meeting could go either way. She looked at me with an intensity that bordered on desperation. That's why I need people I can trust, people who care about more than profit margins. If Daniel wins, your job disappears along with everyone else's when the company gets dismantled and sold for parts. The implications crystallized. This wasn't just about me getting a better job. I was being pulled into a corporate war I barely understood with stakes that affected hundreds of families. Maybe I should walk away. This is too much weight for a mechanic to carry. Maybe. Victoria stood preparing to leave. Or maybe you're exactly the kind of person who can remind everyone what we're fighting for. Workers aren't abstract concepts. They're people like you with daughter like Lily who depend on adults making decent choices. She moved toward her car, then paused. One more thing. Daniel is going to come after you. He'll see you as a threat, proof that I'm making emotional decisions instead of sound business ones. When he does, don't underestimate him. He's spent 4 decades in corporate politics and he plays to win. Sounds like a wonderful work environment. That earned a tired smile. Welcome to executive leadership. Sleep well, Marcus. I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the night, and wondered what exactly I'd agreed to. Sunday passed in a blur of preparation, training my replacement at Frank's garage, teaching a kid named Jimmy everything I could about diagnostic thinking and proper maintenance procedures. Jimmy was 19, eager and reasonably competent. He'd do fine. Frank would be fine. Everything would be fine. I kept telling myself that while doubt gnawed at my certainty. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I dressed in the best clothes I owned, kissed Lily goodbye as she left for school, and drove to Harper Industrial for my first real day. The building looked different when you weren't there as a desperate applicant, more solid, real. I parked in the employee lot instead of hiding by the dumpsters, walked through the lobby like I belonged there, rode the elevator to the 3rd floor where my new office waited. Small space, barely larger than a closet, but it had a door and a window and a desk that wasn't a milk crate. The nameplate read Marcus Reed, Senior Technical Operations Lead, in professional lettering. I set my father's toolbox in the corner, placed a photo of Lily and Emily on the desk, and tried to believe this was happening. Derek appeared in my doorway at 8 sharp, his expression unreadable. Conference room in 10 minutes. Operations meeting. Don't be late. The meeting was exactly what I'd feared. 10 people in expensive suits discussing production metrics and efficiency ratios while I struggled to follow corporate language that might as well have been foreign. Derek ran the meeting with military precision, calling on people for updates, grilling them about missed targets. When he got to me, his voice carried an edge. Marcus, you report directly to me. Your job is solving technical problems across all three plants that our engineers can't crack. You don't have authority to implement changes without my approval. You don't make promises to plant managers without running them by me first. And you don't go around regular maintenance protocols just because you have a theory. Clear, crystal. Good. Plant 1 is having quality issues. Defect rate 15% above acceptable standards for the past 3 months. Engineering can't figure out why. That's your first assignment. You have 2 weeks, fix it, or we'll know this position was a mistake. 2 weeks to solve a problem their entire engineering team had failed to crack. No pressure. After the meeting, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a warm smile approached me. Sarah Williams, CFO, don't let Derek intimidate you. He's testing whether you'll buckle under pressure. Is that standard procedure? For anyone Victoria hires without his input? Absolutely. He sees you as a threat to his authority. Sarah's smile turned conspiratorial. Good luck. We're all rooting for you. Well, most of us. The week blurred into a crash course in corporate survival, learning the org chart, figuring out who actually held power versus who just had impressive titles, navigating the minefield of departmental politics and territorial disputes. Everyone was polite to my face, and I could feel the skepticism radiating underneath. The CEO's pet project, the mechanic playing at management. By Wednesday, I was ready to quit. By Thursday, I was too stubborn to give them the satisfaction. By Friday, I had a plan for Plant 1 that would either prove I belonged here or confirm I'd been delusional to think I could make this work. Plant 1 sat 20 miles from headquarters, a sprawling facility that produced automotive sensor housings with precision tolerances measured in microns. I arrived at 6 in the morning before the day shift and spent 3 hours just watching the production line work. Not consulting engineering reports or reviewing data, just observing the way metal moved through stations, the rhythm of the work, where things flowed smoothly and where they stuttered. The plant manager, a skeptical guy named Robert Johnson, shadowed me for the first hour before giving up and returning to his office. But the floor workers noticed someone actually paying attention. Around 9 o'clock, an older man with graying temples and calloused hands approached during his break. You're the new guy from corporate. His name tag read Joe Martinez, the one who fixed line 3 at plant 2. Word traveled fast. That's me. You really crawled under the line yourself instead of making engineers do it. Seemed faster than explaining what I wanted done. Joe glanced around to make sure no supervisors were listening. You want to know when the defect rate started climbing? I absolutely want to know that. 3 months ago, they cut our training program. Used to be 3 weeks for new hires, real thorough time to practice and learn the equipment. Then corporate decided that was too expensive. Cut it to 1 week. Rush people through the basics, throw them on the floor, expect perfection. The pieces click together. So newer workers don't have time to really understand the tolerances. They know what they're supposed to do, but not why it matters. Exactly, we try to help each other, but management says that slows production. They want speed over everything, but speed without skill just makes expensive scrap metal. I spent the rest of the day talking to workers, listening to their frustrations, understanding the gap between what corporate thought was happening and what actually occurred on the floor. By quitting time, I had 15 pages of notes and a solution that would cost $40,000 in restored training time, but save $65,000 monthly in reduced defects. Friday afternoon, I presented the proposal to Derek with data backing every claim. He listened without expression, then leaned back in his chair. You want me to tell the board we should spend $40,000 because workers complained training was too short. I want you to tell them we can fix a quality problem that's costing us close to $1 million annually by investing $40,000 in proper training. The math is straightforward. And you figured this out by talking to floor workers instead of analyzing engineering data. I figured it out by understanding that workers aren't machines. They need time to develop skills. Rush the process and you get rushed results. Derek drummed his fingers on the desk calculation visible in his eyes. Present this to Victoria Monday. If she approves it, we'll implement a pilot program at Plant 1. If it works, you keep your job. If it fails, you're done. Fair enough. I spent the weekend refining the presentation, rehearsing answers to questions Victoria might ask, trying not to think about how much was riding on convincing her this would work. Monday afternoon, I stood in her office, a space that managed to be impressive without feeling ostentatious. Photos of her father at various company milestones lined one wall. The view overlooked all three plants visible in the distance. Victoria listened to my presentation without interrupting, her face giving nothing away. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Derek thinks this is a waste of money. Derek thinks that workers are interchangeable parts. They're not. The board will question why we're increasing costs when they want us cutting them. Then the board doesn't understand the difference between cost and investment. This pays for itself in 4 months. Victoria smiled sharp and approving. Present this at Thursday's executive meeting. If you can convince them, you have my full support. Thursday's meeting was a masterclass in corporate warfare. Derek challenged every assumption. Sarah asked pointed questions about implementation timelines. Tom Stevens supported me, but cautiously hedging his bets. The other executives watched like sharks circling prey, waiting to see if I'd drown. In the end, Victoria made the decision. Approve $40,000 for a pilot program at Plant 1. Marcus leads implementation. We review results in 30 days. Walking out of that meeting felt like surviving a cage match. But I'd won, barely. Now I just had to deliver results. The next 3 weeks were brutal, implementing the new training program while maintaining production schedules. Fighting resistance from middle managers who resented being told their way was wrong. Dealing with workers who'd gotten cynical about corporate promises and needed convincing, this wasn't just another flavor of the month initiative that would disappear. But slowly, steadily, the defect rate dropped, 15% above standard to 12%, then 9%. By week 3, we hit 6%, actually below the acceptable threshold. Derek called me into his office on a Friday afternoon and did something I'd never expected. He stood, extended his hand, and shook mine with genuine respect. I was wrong about you. That doesn't happen often, but when it does, I admit it. Good work, Reed. Coming from him, that felt like a battlefield promotion. Victoria sent a text that evening, heard about the results. Dinner to celebrate my treat. We met at a quiet restaurant in Indianapolis, neither of us in corporate armor. Just two people who'd somehow become something like friends, despite the professional boundaries that should have kept us separate. You proved yourself. Victoria raised her wine glass in salute. Derek respects you now. That's no small accomplishment. I just did my job. No, you changed how people think about their jobs. Workers at Plant 1 are actually engaged again. Managers are asking how we can implement similar programs at other facilities. You didn't just fix a defect rate, you fixed morale. Pride warmed my chest, but I kept my voice level. That was your father's philosophy, wasn't it? Take care of people, and they'll take care of the work. It is. Pain flickered across her face. I miss him every day. Miss having someone I could trust absolutely, who wanted the company to succeed for the right reasons instead of personal gain. You have people who want that. I have you. The words came soft but weighted. Everyone else either fears me or wants to use me. You're the only person who treats me like a regular human being. The air between us shifted, professional boundaries blurring into something more complicated. I should have pulled back, maintained distance, remembered that she was the CEO and I was an employee, and nothing good came from crossing those lines. Instead, I heard myself saying, loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about having nobody who knows the real you. Victoria's eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, we weren't boss and employee. Just two people who'd both lost someone they loved, who carried weight nobody else could see, who'd found unexpected understanding in the most unlikely circumstances. She reached across the table and took my hand. I'd like to keep having dinners with you, not as CEO and employee, as friends who understand each other. Friends. The word felt simultaneously safe and dangerous. Because friends was a lie we both knew we were telling, and the truth underneath was far more complicated. I'd like that too. We finished dinner talking about everything except work. Her father's legacy, my daughter's dreams, the strange paths that had brought us to this moment. When she dropped me at my truck afterward, neither of us wanted the evening to end. Be careful, Marcus. The warning came quiet. Daniel is watching you. He knows you're important to me, which makes you a target. When he moves against you, and he will, don't be surprised by how dirty he fights. I can handle corporate politics. Can you, oh, her expression turned serious. Because I've been fighting this battle for 10 months and I'm losing ground. The next board meeting is in 6 weeks. If Daniel has enough votes, I'm out and everything we're building falls apart. The full scope of what I'd walked into crystallized. This wasn't about me fixing machines or improving training programs. I'd become a piece in a much larger game, and the stakes were higher than I'd understood. What do you need from me? Keep doing what you're doing. Prove that caring about people produces better results than treating them as expenses to be minimized. Be evidence that my father's way still works. She squeezed my hand once before releasing it. And maybe remind me occasionally that I'm not crazy for trying to honor his legacy instead of cashing out. I watched her drive away, taillights fading into Indianapolis traffic, and felt the weight of expectations settling deeper. This job had stopped being about just me and Lily the moment I'd accepted Victoria's offer. Now I was carrying her hopes too, along with 600 workers who didn't even know their livelihoods depended on whether a mechanic from Plainfield could prove that decency and profit weren't mutually exclusive. No pressure at all. Daniel Harper appeared in my office doorway on a Tuesday morning in late October, his presence filling the small space with expensive cologne and calculated menace. I'd been at Harper Industrial 5 weeks and had successfully avoided him until now. He wore a suit that cost more than my first car, graying hair, perfectly styled, the kind of executive who'd spent 40 years learning exactly how much power a well-timed smile could wield. When he extended his hand, the Rolex on his wrist caught the fluorescent light. Marcus Reed, I've been meaning to introduce myself. Daniel Harper, Chief Operating Officer. I stood shaking his hand with a grip that matched his pressure exactly. Mr. Harper, please call me Daniel. We're all family here at Harper Industrial. The warmth in his voice felt manufactured, like he'd practiced it in front of mirrors. Impressive work and in the plant one quality issues. Derek tells me you've got quite a talent for problem solving. Just doing my job. Modest too, I like that. He settled into the chair across from my desk without being invited, crossing one leg over the other with practiced ease. Tell me, Marcus, how are you finding the transition from garage work to corporate operations? Must be quite a culture shock. The question landed with velvet-wrapped barbs, a reminder that I didn't belong here, that I was out of my depth, that everyone knew I'd been a grease monkey a month ago. Different world, I admitted. But problems are problems. Doesn't matter if you're fixing a transmission or a production line. Same principles apply. Interesting perspective. Daniel's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. Though I wonder if that view oversimplifies the complexities of running a major manufacturer. Victoria has always been a bit naive about business realities. Heart in the right place, but lacking the hard experience necessary for sound executive decisions. There it was, the opening salvo testing whether I defend her or stay neutral. She seems to be doing fine from where I sit. Oh, I'm sure it seems that way, but you haven't seen the quarterly reports. The board meetings where tough choices get made. The market pressures that require cutting costs rather than increasing them. He leaned forward slightly. Between you and me, the board is losing confidence. Good people are going to lose their jobs if Victoria continues down this sentimental path. Sometimes caring too much blinds you to necessary realities. I kept my expression neutral while anger built behind my ribs. Is there something specific you wanted to discuss? Actually, yes. I wanted to extend an invitation. Lunch next week, just you and me. I'd like to get your thoughts on operations. Hear your ideas without corporate filters. You strike me as someone who sees things clearly, someone not afraid to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. Translation, he wanted to recruit me, pull me away from Victoria's sphere of influence, neutralize the threat I represented to his agenda. I appreciate the offer, but my schedule's pretty packed. Maybe another time. Daniel's smile tightened fractionally. Of course. Whenever you're ready. My door is always open, Marcus. Remember that. When things get difficult, and they will, you'll need allies who understand how business really works. He stood smoothing his suit jacket. One more thing. I noticed Victoria had dinner with you and your daughter a few weeks ago. That's wonderful that she's taking such a personal interest in your family. Just be careful. Victoria has a tendency to blur professional boundaries when she gets emotionally attached to people. Wouldn't want you to find yourself in an awkward position. The insinuation hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving behind cologne and implied threats. I sat staring at my office door for 5 minutes, processing the encounter. Victoria had warned me Daniel would come after me. She hadn't mentioned how effectively he'd slip poison into polite conversation. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. This is Daniel Harper. Lunch invitation stands whenever you're ready. Looking forward to working together. I deleted it without responding. That afternoon brought an email from Derek requesting my presence at Plant 3 the following morning. The electrical system needed upgrades to handle increased production demands. Timeline 3 weeks. Budget $150,000. My job to design and implement. I spent the evening and most of the night researching electrical codes, reviewing Plant 3 schematics, consulting with contractors about component availability. By 2 a.m. I had a comprehensive plan that met every specification while staying under budget. The proposal landed on Derek's desk Wednesday morning. He reviewed it without expression, flipping through pages of technical details and cost breakdowns. This is solid work. I'll root it for approval. He paused, studying me. Daniel stopped by your office yesterday. Not a question. Derek knew everything that happened in his domain. He wanted to take me to lunch. I declined. Smart. He's been questioning your hire since day one. Calls you Victoria's charity project in board meetings. Argues you're proof she makes emotional decisions instead of sound business judgments. The information shouldn't have stung, but it did. What do you think? Derek leaned back in his chair. I think you've solved 2 problems my engineers couldn't crack. I think workers actually listen when you talk to them because you treat them like humans instead of production units. And I think Victoria was right to hire you even if her reasoning wasn't purely professional. Meaning she's lonely and surrounded by people who want something from her. You don't want anything except to do good work and take care of your daughter. That makes you valuable in ways that have nothing to do with technical skills. Derek's expression hardened. But it also makes you a target. Daniel sees you as Victoria's weakness. When he moves against her, and he will, you'll be collateral damage. So what do I do? Your job. Let the politics play out above your pay grade. And for God's sake, don't give Daniel ammunition by getting personally involved with the CEO. The warning landed like a punch. Was it that obvious? Did everyone see the connection forming between Victoria and me the way professional respect kept sliding towards something deeper? We're friends, that's all. Keep it that way. Otherwise, you hand Daniel exactly the weapon he needs to destroy both of you. I threw myself into the Plant 3 project with manic focus, using work to avoid thinking about Derek's warning or Daniel's veiled threats, or the way Victoria's smile had started occupying too much space in my thoughts. The electrical upgrade proceeded smoothly for the first week. Contractors showed up on time, work progressed according to schedule, inspections passed without issue. By day 10, we were actually ahead of timeline. Then everything went sideways. Derek called an emergency meeting Friday afternoon, his face grim. Present were me, Victoria, Sarah Williams, and 2 board members I vaguely recognized from corporate photos. Daniel sat at the head of the table like he owned it. Thank you all for coming on short notice. Daniel's voice carried false regret. I've received a troubling report regarding the Plant 3 electrical project. An independent safety consultant reviewed Marcus's plans and identified multiple code violations that could result in serious safety hazards, potential worker injuries, even facility fires. He slid a document across the table, 20 pages of technical language highlighting supposed deficiencies in my design. Outdated code reference, misapplied regulations, conclusions that made my work look not just inadequate, but actively dangerous. My stomach dropped through the floor. I'd triple-checked every specification, verified every code requirement. This couldn't be right. With respect, I followed current Indiana electrical codes to the letter. This report references standards from 3 years ago that have been superseded. Daniel's expression dripped sympathy. Marcus, I understand this is your first major project. Nobody's questioning your effort or intentions. But this is exactly why we have certified electrical engineers instead of mechanics designing critical infrastructure. The consultant is a nationally recognized expert with 30 years of experience. Who happens to work for Stanton Industries, our primary competitor? Victoria's voice cut through the room like a blade. Roger Bennett, correct, the same consultant who worked for them from 2018 to 2020. Daniel didn't flinch. His previous employment doesn't invalidate his expertise. The code violations he identified are real and documented. We cannot proceed with a design that puts workers at risk. Sarah jumped in, flipping through the report. These citations reference the 2019 electrical code. Indiana updated to the 2022 standard 18 months ago. Marcus's design is compliant with current regulations. Are you certain? One of the board members leaned forward, concern etched across his features. Because if there's any doubt about safety, there's no doubt. I kept my voice steady despite rage building behind my ribs. This report is either incompetent or deliberately misleading. Every specification meets or exceeds current code requirements. I can provide documentation proving compliance. Daniel spread his hands in a gesture of reasonable concern. I'm sure you believe that, Marcus. But the board has a fiduciary responsibility to ensure worker safety. We can't risk moving forward based on assurances from someone without formal electrical engineering credentials when a certified expert has raised red flags. The trap snapped shut with surgical precision. Question my qualifications, cast doubt on my competence. Hide behind safety concerns nobody could argue against. Even if I proved the report was fraudulent, the damage was done. The board would remember Marcus Reed's design requiring emergency review contractors being sent home, timelines blown because the mechanic playing engineer had gotten in over his head. I move that we suspend the Plant 3 project immediately pending independent review by a qualified electrical engineering firm. Daniel looked around the table with manufactured reluctance. I take no pleasure in this, but we must prioritize safety over schedule. The board members nodded. Even Sarah looked uncertain, caught between supporting me and acknowledging the legitimate need for caution when worker safety was supposedly at stake. Victoria's jaw clenched, but she had no good move. Push back too hard, and she'd look reckless, willing to gamble with lives to protect her pet project. Accept Daniel's motion, and she validated his argument that I was unqualified. I'll arrange for an independent review. Her words came clipped and furious. But I want the review firm selected jointly by operations and the board, not unilaterally by Daniel. And I want their findings presented to this group within 72 hours, not dragged out for weeks while we hemorrhage schedule. Agreed. Daniel's smile suggested victory already secured. Marcus, in the interim, you're suspended from project responsibilities pending the review outcome. We'll need you to surrender all project documentation and site access credentials. Suspended. The word echoed in the sudden silence. Not fired, not yet, but sidelined with the implication hanging that this might be the beginning of the end. I met Victoria's eyes across the table and saw her rage and helplessness. She'd walked into this meeting blind, given Daniel the element of surprise, and now we were both paying the price. Understood. I stood, keeping my spine straight and my expression neutral. I'll have all documentation delivered to Derek's office within the hour. Walking out of that conference room felt like a death march. Word would spread through the company within minutes. Marcus Reed suspended his work under safety review, the CEO's gamble on the unqualified mechanic blowing up exactly like Daniel had predicted. I made it to my office, closed the door, and sat staring at my father's toolbox for a long time. Maybe Derek had been right. Maybe I should have stayed at Frank's garage, fixing transmissions and oil leaks, leaving corporate warfare to people who understood the rules. My phone buzzed, Victoria calling. Don't answer it here. Meet me at the parking garage in 10 minutes. Her voice carried urgency that bypassed professional boundaries completely. I grabbed my jacket and took the stairs instead of the elevator, avoiding encounters with colleagues who'd already heard about my suspension. Victoria waited in her Mercedes on the garage's third-level engine running. I climbed into the passenger seat, and she pulled out immediately, driving in silence until we'd cleared the corporate campus. I'm sorry. The words came raw with emotion. I should have seen this coming. Should have protected you better. How Daniel set this up perfectly. You couldn't have anticipated. I've been fighting him for 10 months, Marcus. I should have known he'd go after you the moment you became important to me. She gripped the steering wheel hard enough to whiten her knuckles. Roger Bennett is a fraud. He's been supplementing his consulting income by doing favors for companies willing to pay him to find problems with competitors' work. But proving that takes time we don't have. So what do? You spend the weekend reviewing every line of your design, Find documentation for every code reference, every specification decision, every component choice. Make it airtight and undeniable. Monday morning, we bring in the independent reviewer, and you walk them through your work with such thorough competence, they'll have no choice but to validate it. And if they don't, Victoria's voice went hard, then I fire Daniel for hiring a fraudulent consultant. But that scorched earth forces the board to choose sides, and I might lose. Better that you prove yourself beyond question and make Daniel's attack backfire. She pulled into a restaurant parking lot, killed the engine, and finally looked at me. Exhaustion shadowed her eyes. Stress had carved new lines around her mouth. I'm putting too much on you. This isn't fair. You came here to fix machines, not fight corporate wars. You gave me a chance when nobody else would. Fair doesn't enter into it. I reached across and took her hand before thinking better of it. We'll get through this. Her fingers intertwined with mine, the gesture crossing every professional boundary we'd been pretending to maintain. I can't lose you, Marcus, not just because you're good at your job, because you're the only person in my life who sees me instead of the CEO. If Daniel forces you out, he won't. I'm too stubborn to give him the satisfaction. We sat there holding hands in a parking lot while the November afternoon faded to evening, two people clinging to each other against currents trying to pull us apart. Eventually, Victoria's phone rang with the inevitable crisis requiring her attention, and we had to return to the real world. She dropped me at my truck in the Harper Industrial lot. Be careful this weekend. Daniel knows where you live, knows about Lily. I don't think he'd actually do anything but desperate men make dangerous choices. I'll be careful. I drove home trying to convince myself this was manageable, that a weekend of preparation would be enough to salvage my job and reputation. But doubt gnawed steadily at my confidence. Lily sensed something wrong the moment I walked through the door. She'd developed radar for my moods, could read tension in my shoulders and stress in my silence. Bad day at work. Complicated day. Some people don't think I'm qualified for my job. I have to prove them wrong. She set down her homework and looked at me with Emily's steady gaze. Are you qualified? I think so. I hope so. Then prove it. That's what you always tell me. Don't worry about what other people think. Just do the work and let the work speak for itself. 9 years old and dispensing wisdom I needed to hear. I pulled her into a hug, drawing strength from her certainty. The weekend blurred into obsessive documentation. Every electrical specification cross-referenced against current code requirements. Every component choice justified with manufacturer specifications and industry standards. Every safety margin documented and explained. By Sunday night, I had a 50-page technical brief that proved my design exceeded all regulatory requirements. But doubt still whispered that it wouldn't be enough, that Daniel had fixed this game before I'd even known I was playing. Monday morning, Victoria and I met the independent reviewer in the Plant 3 electrical room, surrounded by conduit and junction boxes and the exposed infrastructure of my supposedly dangerous design. The reviewer was a woman in her 50s named Dr. Patricia Morrison, professional engineer, with credentials that filled 2 pages and a reputation for brutal honesty. She spent 4 hours examining every connection, measuring every clearance, verifying every specification against code books she'd brought from her office. I answered her questions with technical precision, walking her through my reasoning for each decision, demonstrating that what Daniel's consultant had called violations were actually improvements over minimum code requirements. Victoria watched from a distance, not interfering, letting my work defend itself. Finally, Dr. Morrison set down her measuring instruments and fixed me with an appraising stare. Mr. Reed, this is excellent work. Not just code compliant, but thoughtfully designed with safety margins that exceed industry standards. Whoever told you this design had violations was either incompetent or lying. Relief flooded through me with physical force. So you'll certify it? I'll do better than that. I'll write a report explaining why Roger Bennett's analysis was fraudulent trash that should disqualify him from ever consulting on electrical systems again. She smiled grimly. I've seen his work before. He's a hack who charges companies to rubber stamp whatever conclusions they want. About time someone called him out. The emergency board meeting that afternoon felt like vindication and warfare combined. Dr. Morrison presented her findings with academic precision, methodically dismantling Bennett's report point by point. The board members who'd questioned my competence Friday now looked embarrassed. Derek's expression approached smug satisfaction. Daniel sat stone-faced, his trap sprung backwards. The weapon he'd built to destroy me now pointed at his own credibility. Dr. Morrison, are you suggesting Roger Bennett deliberately falsified his safety review? One board member's voice carried shock and anger. I'm stating it as fact. He cited outdated codes, misapplied current standards, and drew conclusions unsupported by actual system analysis. This wasn't incompetence. This was someone paid to find problems whether they existed or not. All eyes turned to Daniel. Victoria's voice cut through the tension with surgical precision. Daniel, you hired Bennett personally, correct? Paid him from discretionary consulting funds without going through normal procurement channels. I used a consultant I'd worked with before. A consultant who worked for our primary competitor and has a documented history of fraudulent safety reports. Sarah slid documentation across the table. I pulled his payment records. $40,000 from your discretionary account. The same amount Stanton Industries paid him last year to discredit a rival's manufacturing process. The implications crystallized. Daniel hadn't just attacked me. He'd used company funds to hire a fraudulent consultant, potentially exposed Harper Industrial to liability, and done it all to settle a personal vendetta against Victoria's hiring decisions. The board chair, Patricia Moore, a woman in her late 60s who'd worked with Robert Harper for 3 decades, stood with quiet fury radiating from her small frame. Daniel, I'm calling for an immediate vote to remove you from the plant, 3 project oversight. All in favor, 7 hands went up. Only Daniel abstained. Motion carries. Furthermore, I'm recommending the full board review your consulting expenditures for the past 12 months. If we find a pattern of this behavior, we'll discuss more serious consequences. Daniel's composure finally cracked. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against expensive flooring. You're making a mistake. Victoria's emotional attachment to Marcus is clouding her judgment. She's running this company into the ground with sentimental nonsense about worker satisfaction and training programs while our competitors eat our market share. When the quarterly reports come out next month, you'll see I was right. But by then it'll be too late. He swept out of the conference room, leaving shocked silence in his wake. Victoria remained perfectly still, her face giving nothing away, but I saw color rise in her cheeks. Patricia Moore touched her shoulder gently. Your father would be proud of how you handled that. Don't let Daniel's bitterness make you question yourself. After the meeting, Victoria pulled me aside in the hallway. That wasn't a victory. That was Daniel showing his cards before he wanted to. Now he knows we're onto him, which makes him more dangerous. He's been removed from project oversight. His credibility is damaged. How is that not a win? Because he still has board allies, an equity stake, and 40 years of corporate experience. All we did was wound him. Wounded animals are the most vicious. She lowered her voice as employees passed nearby. He's going to escalate. Come after both of us harder. I need you to be ready. Ready for what? I don't know yet, but Daniel doesn't lose gracefully. He'll find another angle, another weapon. When he does, it'll be worse than fake safety reports. Her warning proved prophetic, faster than either of us expected. 3 days later, my phone buzzed at 11 p.m. Unknown number. Text message with a single photo attached. Lily on the playground at her school circled in red marker. No words, just the image and the implicit threat. My blood turned to ice. I called the number immediately. It rang once, then disconnected. Tried again. Same result. I was dialing 911 when Victoria called. Did you get a message, a photo? Of Lily. Someone's watching her school. Mine was different. Photo of my house with the caption, "Accidents happen." Her voice shook with barely controlled rage. This is Daniel. Has to be. He's trying to intimidate us into backing off. I'm calling the police. Do it. But Marcus, they won't be able to do much with an anonymous text. No explicit threat, no way to trace it back to Daniel directly. Best case, they'll file a report and tell us to be careful. She was right, but I called anyway, gave the officer who answered every detail, forwarded the photo. He took my information with professional sympathy and promised to send a patrol car past Lily's school the next day. Then I sat in the dark mobile home, gripping my phone, rage and fear warring in my chest. Daniel had crossed a line from corporate politics into personal threats. He'd made my daughter a target. Victoria showed up 40 minutes later, letting herself in without knocking, and found me still sitting in the dark. I'm hiring private security for Lily's school. Don't argue, it's already arranged. Someone will be watching her from tomorrow until this is resolved. I can't afford company expense, employee family protection. And before you argue about that being inappropriate, remember I'm the CEO and I decide what's appropriate. She sat beside me close enough that our shoulders touched. I'm sorry. I pulled you into this mess. Daniel is using you to hurt me, and now Lily is caught in the crossfire. This isn't your fault. It absolutely is. I should have known he'd played dirty. Should have protected you better from the start. Her hand found mine in the darkness. If something happened to Lily because of me, I'd never forgive myself. We sat like that for a long time, two people clinging to each other while the world outside grew increasingly hostile. Somewhere in those quiet minutes, we crossed the final boundary we'd been pretending still existed between us. When Victoria finally spoke again, her voice carried exhaustion and something deeper. I can't keep pretending this is just friendship. These last 2 months, you've become the best part of my day, the only person I trust completely. And I know it's inappropriate and complicated and probably a disaster waiting to happen, but I need you to know I kissed her before she could finish the sentence. Not gentle or tentative, but fierce and certain, pouring weeks of suppressed emotion into the connection. She responded with equal intensity, her hands finding my face, my hair pulling me closer. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, reality came crashing back. She was my boss. I was her employee. This violated every professional boundary and handed Daniel exactly the weapon he needed to destroy us both. We can't do this. The words hurt coming out. Derek warned me. Daniel will use it against you, against both of us. I know. Victoria rested her forehead against mine, eyes closed. I know all the reasons this is wrong, but I'm so tired of doing what's smart instead of what's true. And the truth is I'm falling for you. Have been since you changed my tire in the rain and refused my money. My phone buzzed. Text from Derek. I know Victoria's there. Get her out before someone sees her car, and this becomes tomorrow's office gossip. We'll talk in the morning. The interruption forced perspective. Victoria and I separated, creating physical distance that did nothing to diminish what had just shifted between us. He's right. You need to go. I know. She stood smoothing her clothes, rebuilding professional armor piece by piece. But Marcus, I meant what I said, and I'm not giving up on this just because it's complicated. What about Daniel? What about the board? What about the 600 jobs riding on you? Staying CEO? I'll handle Daniel. We'll take this slow, be discreet, keep it separate from work. Her smile held determination and hope in equal measure. My father used to say the best things in life are worth fighting for. I'm willing to fight for this if you are. Every rational instinct screamed to walk away, to maintain boundaries, to prioritize survival over emotion. But standing there looking at Victoria's fierce certainty, I couldn't summon the strength to be reasonable. We take it slow, we're careful. And if it becomes a problem for you professionally, it won't. I won't let it. She kissed me once more, quick and promising. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we deal with Daniel's next move. After she left, I checked every lock on the mobile home twice, then stood outside Lily's bedroom door, listening to her breathe. She was safe. For now. But Daniel had shown he was willing to threaten children to win his corporate war. The thought of what I'd do if he actually hurt her sent dark currents through my mind. I'd spent my life being the good guy, the one who helped people and did the right thing. But everyone has a line. Everyone has something they'll protect at any cost. Lily was mine. Derek cornered me first thing Tuesday morning, closing my office door with deliberate care. Victoria's car was at your mobile home until midnight. Please tell me you're not stupid enough to be sleeping with the CEO. We're not sleeping together, but you want to be. He read it in my face. Jesus, Marcus, this is exactly what Daniel needs. The moment he finds out, and he will find out, he'll use it to prove Victoria makes emotional decisions instead of rational ones. He'll argue she hired you because she had feelings for you, that she's compromised, that the board needs new leadership. So what do you suggest, that I stop seeing her? I suggest you remember what's at stake. Your job, her position, 600 employees who will be out of work if Daniel wins and sells his company to the highest bidder. Derek's voice turned harsh. You want to be with Victoria, fine. But wait until after the board meeting in 4 weeks. Wait until her position is secure. Don't hand Daniel ammunition when we're already fighting an uphill battle. He was right. I knew he was right. But the memory of Victoria's kiss made rational choices feel like betrayal. The rest of November blurred into careful distance. Victoria and I maintained professional boundaries at work. No private meetings, no lingering conversations, nothing that would fuel gossip. But nights she'd call after Lily went to bed, and we'd talk for hours, not about work, but about everything else. Our childhoods, our losses, our hopes for futures that seemed increasingly intertwined. The security guard at Lily's school became familiar, a quiet presence that reassured me while reminding me daily that we were living under threat. Plant 1's defect rate continued dropping. Plant 3's electrical upgrade completed on schedule. My work produced undeniable results that even Daniel couldn't attack directly. But in the background, the board meeting loomed. December 1st. The day Daniel would make his move forced the vote he'd been building toward for months. Victoria spent increasingly long hours at the office preparing presentations, building alliances, fighting to keep the company her father had built. Thanksgiving arrived with awkward questions. Lily wanted to know why Victoria didn't come for dinner anymore. I fumbled an explanation about her being busy with work while guilt gnawed at me. The day after Thanksgiving, Victoria called with defeat in her voice. The quarterly numbers are bad. Revenue down 8%. Profit margins squeezed. Daniel's going to use them as proof my approach doesn't work. But the improvements we've made haven't had time to show in quarterly numbers. Training programs take months to impact the bottom line. I know, you know, but Daniel will spin it as evidence that caring about workers is financially irresponsible. And he'll be convincing because he has 40 years of corporate experience backing his argument. So we fight back. Show the board the long-term projections, the metrics that prove worker satisfaction translates to better productivity. Marcus, I'm losing. The admission came quiet and broken. Patricia Moore is solid, so are 2 others. But that leaves 4 votes Daniel can work on. I need 5 to keep my position. The math doesn't work. What about the client contracts? The new business we've won. One major client is reconsidering, Midwest Automotive. Their CEO got a better offer from Stanton Industries, 12% under our price. And somehow Stanton knew our exact bid specifications. Her laugh was bitter. Daniel leaked it. I can't prove it, but I know it was him. He's bleeding us from every angle while positioning himself as the solution to the problems he's creating. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Daniel wasn't just attacking Victoria in board meeting series. He was sabotaging the company's performance to make his arguments self-fulfilling prophecies. We expose him, show the board what he's doing. With what proof? Corporate espionage is hard to trace. By the time we found evidence, even if we could, the board meeting will be over and I'll be out. Silence stretched between us. I'm sorry, Marcus. I failed. Failed, you failed. My father failed everyone who believed in me. Don't. The word came sharp. We still have 4 days. We find proof of Daniel's sabotage. We win back Midwest Automotive. We do whatever it takes. I'm tired of fighting. Then rest. Let me fight for you. That night, I called Sarah Williams at home, pitching my plan. She listened without interrupting, her silence carrying calculation. What you're suggesting could work, or it could blow up spectacularly and get us all fired. A pause. I'm in. What do you need from me? Every financial record you can access showing Daniel's consulting payments, meeting schedules, communications with vendors. Anything that might show a pattern. That's going to take all weekend. Then we'd better start now. Sarah, Derek, Tom Stevens, and I spent the weekend in Sarah's home office, building a case against Daniel with the intensity of prosecutors preparing for trial. Every suspicious payment traced. Every meeting with competitors documented. Every leaked specification cross-referenced with timing and access. By Sunday evening, we had circumstantial evidence suggesting Daniel had been in contact with Stanton Industries executives at least 12 times over the past 6 months. Not proof of espionage, but enough to raise serious questions. The harder challenge was Midwest Automotive. Their CEO, William Hartley, had already signed with Stanton. Getting him to reconsider would require more than just matching their price. It would require giving him a reason to trust Harper Industrial when we'd apparently already failed him. Monday morning, I did something either brilliant or career-ending. I called Hartley directly without clearing it with Victoria or Derek. Mr. Hartley, this is Marcus Reed from Harper Industrial. I need 10 minutes of your time to discuss the Stanton offer you accepted. His voice came cautious and slightly annoyed. I've already committed to Stanton, Mr. Reed. That decision is final. I understand, but I think you should know how Stanton got information about our bid. Because if they're willing to cheat to win your business, they're willing to cheat you once they have it. That got his attention. I'm listening. I laid out what we'd found. The pattern of Daniel's contacts with Stanton executives. The suspicious timing of their counteroffer. The way their bid matched our specifications with impossible precision. You're telling me someone at Harper leaked proprietary information to your competitor. I'm telling you our COO has been sabotaging his own company to force a change in leadership. He leaked your specifications to Stanton to make our CEO look incompetent. You got caught in the crossfire of a corporate civil war. Hartley was quiet for a long moment. Even if that's true, Stanton's offer is better. I have a fiduciary duty to my shareholders. Their offer is 12% under ours. That's not competitive pricing. That's predatory undercutting funded by insider information. They're planning to lowball you for a year, drive us out of the market, then raise prices once they've eliminated competition. You won't save money long term. You'll get locked into a monopoly supplier who'll squeeze you for every penny once you've burned your bridge with us. That's speculation. It's pattern recognition. Stanton pulled the same strategy with two other manufacturers in the past 5 years. Both are now paying 20% above market rates because they have no alternatives. I paused, letting that sink in. Stay with Harper Industrial. We'll match Stanton's price. And I'll personally guarantee as your dedicated account manager that you'll get the quality and service you need. You're asking me to bet on a company that's currently self-destructing and a CEO who might not survive the week. I'm asking you to bet on people who are fighting to do business the right way instead of taking the easy route. Victoria Harper is trying to honor her father's legacy. I'm trying to prove that caring about quality and integrity still matters. Give us the chance to show you we're worth your trust. Another long silence. Send me documentation of Daniel Stanton contacts. I'll review it with my team. No promises. Thank you, sir. That's all I ask. I hung up and immediately called Victoria to confess what I'd done. She listened to my explanation with a silence that could have meant anything. You went around me to contact a major client directly. Yes. Promised him things I haven't authorized. Yes. Put your personal reputation on the line for a contract you have no official authority over. Yes. Her laugh surprised me, genuine and slightly manic. God, I love you. The words hung in the air between us, too big for cell phone connections, too important for casual conversation. Victoria, I know we agreed to take it slow. I know this complicates everything, but it's true and I'm done pretending it's not. Her voice steadied professional armor, sliding back into place. Send me what you told Hartley. If he actually bites, we'll present it at the board meeting as evidence that my leadership can still win client loyalty. That night, I lay awake thinking about her confession, about Lily sleeping safely in the next room, about the precarious house of cards we were all living in. 4 days until the board meeting. 4 days to prove that doing business with integrity could compete with Daniel's cutthroat pragmatism. Wednesday afternoon, Hartley called back. We're staying with Harper Industrial, but I'm holding you personally accountable, Mr. Reed. You're my point of contact. Any problems, any quality issues, anything at all, I'm coming directly to you. Understood. Thank you for your trust, sir. Don't thank me yet. Prove I made the right call. I walked straight to Victoria's office and delivered the news. She came around her desk and pulled me into a hug that crossed every professional boundary in full view of anyone who might pass her glass-walled office. You just saved my chance at the board meeting. Potentially saved the company. She pulled back, eyes bright with emotion. How did you know what to say to him? I told him the truth, that we're fighting for something worth preserving. Turns out some people still respond to that. Friday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. The board meeting. Everything we'd fought for coming down to one vote, one decision that would determine whether Victoria kept her position or Daniel won his year-long campaign. I wasn't invited to attend. Neither was Derek or Sarah. Board meetings were for board members only. We waited in Derek's office drinking terrible coffee and not talking while Victoria fought alone in the conference room one floor above. 3 hours felt like 3 days. Finally, Sarah's phone rang. She listened for 30 seconds, her expression giving nothing away, then set the phone down carefully. Victoria retained her position. 5-3 vote. Patricia Moore gave an impassioned speech about Robert Harper's legacy that swung the two undecided votes. Daniel has been formally reprimanded for hiring Roger Bennett and is under investigation for the Stanton leaks. Relief hit like a physical blow. Derek actually smiled. Tom pumped his fist, but Sarah's expression remained troubled. Victoria said something else. Daniel walked out swearing this wasn't over. Said she'd regret humiliating him and that he'd make sure everyone paid for choosing her over competence. The victory suddenly felt less complete. We'd won the battle, but the war was far from finished. Daniel was still COO, still had equity stake, still had allies who'd voted to remove Victoria. A wounded enemy with nothing left to lose. Victoria appeared in Derek's doorway, looking exhausted and triumphant and fragile all at once. We did it. You did it. Derek stood, extending his hand. Your father would be proud. Marcus did it. He won back Hartley when I was ready to give up. Reminded the board that relationships matter more than quarterly fluctuations. She looked at me with an intensity that made the room feel too small. Can we talk privately? We walked to her office in silence, both of us aware that the next conversation would determine everything that came after this moment. She closed the door and turned to face me. I told the board about us. My stomach dropped. You what? Not the details, just that you and I have become close and that I needed them to know. So there was no appearance of impropriety. That any decisions I make about your employment or advancement are based purely on merit and results, and that I've asked Derek to be the final authority on your performance reviews to eliminate bias. How did they react? Patricia Moore said it was about time I found someone who made me happy. 2 others looked uncomfortable but didn't object. Daniel tried to make it into evidence of inappropriate judgment, but Patricia shut him down. Victoria moved closer. The point is, it's not a secret anymore. We don't have to hide or pretend or keep each other at arm's length. What about Lily? What about the complications of you being my boss? I've thought about that constantly. And here's what I know. She took my hands in hers. I'm falling in love with you, Marcus Reed. Have been for weeks. Maybe since the moment that you refused my money for changing a tire. And I think you feel the same way. I did. God help me, I did. But saying it out loud meant accepting all the complications that came with it. I have a daughter who depends on me, who's already lost one parent and can't lose another. If this goes wrong, it won't. We won't let it. She cupped my face in her hands, forcing me to meet her eyes. I know it's complicated. I know there are risks, but you taught me something important. You can't cut corners to quality. You can't build something meaningful without investing time and care and accepting that the process will be messy. Now I'm asking you to believe it applies to us too. The kiss that followed felt like free fall and coming home simultaneously. When we finally broke apart, Victoria was smiling with the first genuine joy I'd seen on her face in weeks. So where do we go from here? Slowly, carefully, but together. She glanced at her watch. And starting with you picking up Lily from school and bringing her to my house for dinner. I think it's time she and I got to know each other better. As friends first, then maybe eventually something more. Walking out of Harper Industrial that afternoon felt like stepping into a different future than the one I'd imagined when I first drove past Victoria on Route 9. I'd stopped to help a stranger and somehow ended up here with a job that mattered, and a woman I was falling for, and a daughter who deserved to see her father happy again. It wasn't simple. It wasn't uncomplicated. Daniel was still out there wounded and dangerous, planning whatever revenge he'd threatened in the board meeting. But for the first time in 2 years, I felt like maybe the universe was rewarding instead of punishing me. Like all those times I'd chosen doing right over doing smart, had accumulated into something bigger than individual moments of kindness. Like maybe, just maybe, this story had a happy ending? After all, epilogue. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Harper Industrial watching spring rain streak the floor-to-ceiling windows, waiting for Victoria to finish her quarterly board presentation upstairs. The marble still gleamed with the same intimidating perfection, but I no longer felt like an intruder tracking mud across someone else's world. My nameplate now read Marcus Reed, Vice President of Operations. The promotion had come in February, 3 months after the December board meeting that had secured Victoria's position. Derek had recommended it. Patricia Moore had seconded it. Even the board members who'd voted with Daniel acknowledged that my work across all three plants had produced results impossible to ignore. Plant 1's defect rate remained at historic lows. Plant 2 ran at 98% uptime. Plant 3's electrical systems, the ones Daniel had tried to sabotage, had become a model for efficiency that other manufacturers asked to study. The training programs I'd implemented expanded company-wide. Worker satisfaction scores climbed, turnover dropped, and somehow impossibly we'd increased both productivity and humanity at the same time. My father would have been proud. Frank certainly was. The elevator dinged and Victoria emerged with Patricia Moore, both women smiling with the easy confidence of people who just delivered excellent news to skeptical audiences. Revenue up 14% year over year, Victoria said as she reached me, her hand finding mine, naturally the gesture no longer generating shocked stares from passing employees. Profit margins strongest in 5 years. 2 new major clients signed. The board actually used the word visionary to describe our approach, which means they're finally admitting your father was right all along, Patricia added with satisfaction. People matter. Treat them well and they'll build you an empire. Treat them like expenses and you'll bleed talent until there's nothing left worth leading. She excused herself with a knowing smile, leaving Victoria and me alone in the lobby where we'd first faced each other 7 months ago. Daniel resigned last week, Victoria said quietly, accepted a severance package and signed a non-compete. He's someone else's problem now. I'd heard rumors but hadn't wanted to ask. How do you feel about that? Relieved, Tio. He was my uncle, part of my father's history, but he chose greed over family personal gain over the company's future. Sometimes people make themselves impossible to keep. She squeezed my hand. The board investigation found enough evidence of his Stanton contacts to justify termination for cause, but I didn't want it to end that way. My father wouldn't have wanted his brother publicly humiliated even after everything Daniel did. So you gave him a graceful exit. I gave him what he'd never given anyone else, mercy. Her smile turned rueful. Besides, I'd rather win on merit than vengeance. Our success is the best answer to his criticism. We walked out together into the parking lot where my F-150 sat next to Victoria's Mercedes. The truck looked out of place among the luxury vehicles, but I'd kept it anyway. Some symbols mattered more than fitting in. Lily's waiting at my house, Victoria said. She's been baking all afternoon. Something about a science experiment involving yeast and sugar ratios. She's been talking about that all week. Fair warning, your kitchen might look like a disaster zone. I don't mind. The house feels alive when she's there. Victoria's voice went soft. When you're both there. We'd been taking it slow exactly as promised. Dinners together twice a week. Weekend outings when work allowed. Lily had warmed to Victoria gradually the way kids do when they're protecting their hearts and testing whether new people deserve their trust. Last month, Lily had asked, carefully casual, whether Victoria might want to come to her school science fair. Victoria had rearranged a board meeting to attend. Watching them examine Lily's project together, heads bent close over a model of hydraulic systems, I'd felt something settle in my chest. Not quite family yet, but the foundation for it. I've been thinking, Victoria said, unlocking her car. There's a house for sale 2 streets over from mine. 4 bedrooms, big yard, good school district. The real estate agent mentioned it this morning. My heart kicked up tempo. Yeah, it would be convenient for Lily's commute to school, for our work schedules. She met my eyes over the roof of the Mercedes, and maybe eventually for other reasons too. The implication hung between us, tentative and hopeful. Not moving in together, not yet, but building toward a future where that might make sense. I'd like to see it, Victoria's smile blazed brighter than the April sun breaking through rain clouds. Saturday morning, I'll set it up. I drove home to the mobile home one last time knowing my days there were numbered. The medical debt was paid, the bills current. I'd started a college fund for Lily that actually had money in it. We didn't need to stay in Shady Acres anymore. But I'd kept it these extra months anyway, held onto it like a talisman. Proof that I hadn't forgotten where I came from. Reminder that success didn't erase history or make struggle less real. Inside, I found the photo of Emily that had watched me through so many desperate mornings. I picked it up carefully, running my thumb along the frame. "I'm doing okay," I told her, picture the words I'd been saving for months. "Lily's thriving. I met someone. You'd like her. She's stubborn and brilliant and sees the world like you did, thinks people matter more than profits." The photo smiled back, frozen in time, forever 34. "I'm going to be happy again. That feels strange to say, like I'm betraying you by moving forward. But I think you'd want this. You always said I had too much love to keep locked it away." I set the photo back on the shelf and grabbed my keys. Victoria's house glowed with warm light when I pulled up, music drifting from an open window, the smell of fresh bread making my stomach growl. Through the kitchen window, I could see Lily wearing an apron 3 sizes too big, gesturing animatedly, while Victoria laughed at something she'd said. My phone buzzed as I climbed out of the truck. Text from Frank Hurd about the VP promotion. "Damn proud of you, son. Your daddy's probably up there grinning like a fool." I smiled and typed back, "Couldn't have done it without you. Thanks for everything, Frank. For believing in me when nobody else did." His response came immediately. "You earned it yourself. I just gave you room to prove what you already were." Inside, chaos reigned exactly as predicted. Flour dusted every surface. Mixing bowls crowded the counters. Lily had created some kind of bread sculpture that defied both physics and good taste. "Dad," she launched herself at me, leaving floury handprints on my work shirt. "Victoria says I can use her kitchen whenever I want for experiments. Isn't that amazing?" Extremely amazing. I met Victoria's eyes over Lily's head. "Hope you know what you're signing up for." "I do." Victoria's smile held certainty and joy. "Absolutely." We ate Lily's experimental bread at the dining room table, the three of us, and it tasted like cardboard mixed with hope. Nobody complained. We praised her scientific method, discussed what she might try differently next time, made plans for future experiments. After dinner, Lily sprawled on the couch with one of Victoria's engineering textbooks, reading with fierce concentration while Victoria and I cleaned the kitchen. "She asked me something yesterday," Victoria said quietly, rinsing a mixing bowl. "Wanted to know if I was going to be her new mom." My hands stilled on the dish I was drying. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd never try to replace Emily, but I'd very much like to be someone important in her life if she'd let me. Someone who loves her and wants to help her grow into whoever she's meant to become." "And what did she say?" Victoria's eyes glistened, but her smile held steady. "She said that sounded okay. Then asked if that meant she could have a pie since your mobile home doesn't allow pets." I laughed, the sound coming from somewhere deep and genuine. "Sounds like Lily, always negotiating." I told her we'd discuss it, with you, as a family. Family. The words settled around us like a benediction. Later, driving back to the mobile home with Lily drowsing in the passenger seat, I detoured past Route 9. The stretch of highway where I'd first seen Victoria made the choice that changed everything. The shoulder looked the same, gravel and grass, and nothing to mark the spot where my life had pivoted. No monument to the moment kindness met opportunity and somehow produced a future I'd stopped believing existed. But I didn't need a marker. I carried the memory in my bones. The rain and the flat tire and the split-second decision to pull over instead of driving past. My father's voice echoed, "You help folks when they need it. That's what separates us from animals." He'd been right. Not because helping people guaranteed rewards or cosmic justice, but because being the kind of person who stopped was its own reward. Living with integrity meant sleeping without regret even when the cost ran high. I'd gotten lucky that the stranger turned out to be someone who could change my life. But even if she'd been nobody, even if helping her had cost me the interview and the job and every opportunity that followed, I'd still have made the same choice. That was the person I wanted Lily to see. The man Emily had loved, the son my father had raised. Up ahead, I saw hazard lights flashing. A car pulled over, hood up, steam rising. A man stood beside it in the rain looking frustrated and lost. I checked the time. 8 p.m. Lily needed to get home, start her homework, prepare for school tomorrow. But my foot was already moving toward the brake. Dad, Lily stirred, noticing we were slowing. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. I pulled onto the shoulder behind the stranded car. Someone needs help. Won't take long. Lily peered through the windshield at the man, then at me, and something in her expression shifted. Understanding. Pride. Mom was right about you, she said softly. You make people believe good things still exist. I squeezed her hand and stepped out into the rain. The man looked up as I approached, hope and uncertainty mixing on his face. Car overheated. AAA says 90 minutes minimum. I grabbed my father's toolbox from the truck bed, Thomas Reed's name still carved into the lid, the tools still maintained and ready. Let's take a look. I'm Marcus. James. He shook my hand gratefully. I appreciate you stopping. Most people just drive by. I smiled, thinking about a rainy morning 7 months ago, a flat tire and a woman who'd changed my life without meaning to. Yeah, I said, opening his hood and reaching for a wrench. Most people do, but not all. Not me, not anymore.